So you have these lines. They're very, very subtle if you can see them in the actual paper. Very subtle. And I've put them in, but they're way too strong. So I have clean water on my brush. I don't want it to be very, very wet because it will cause blossoms in this. And what I will do is I'll soften the edge so that all of a sudden it doesn't become a harsh line. It starts to blend in. You see them, but you blend it in. So that is a wonderful way to soften your edges and get the feeling of fabric, okay? And you'll not soften all of it because you want to show where the fold is. So you want to look at, this is where you have to really observe what it is that you're painting. Because sometimes there is an area where you're going to want the hard line. Watercolor is a combination of hard and soft lines, and you always want to make sure that you are getting a combination of those. You don't want one painting to always be just hard edges, and you don't want it all to be soft. You want a combination of both, because that is what depicts what it is that you're actually painting. Okay, so this, and you'll notice often I will go like this, and that means that I'm pulling more water off. If I'm not close to the sponge, a lot of times I'll do that. I have a little cotton rag that I sit on my lap so I can always wipe my hands. Okay, so let me just do a couple more little things. These are little soft edges here, and I just want to show that there's wrinkles in this. Again, I'll take clean water on the brush, take it off with the sponge, and then soften those edges so that you can see them, but not, they don't jump out at you. It just looks like, oh yeah, there's wrinkles there. Okay, so that's, I'll show you this in just a second. Okay, so I don't know if you can see that. I want to add a little bit more back here because this is like, actually it's coming down a little hill, if you will. And I want a little bit more here and right there. Okay. Watercolor is the best thing that you can do is practice how much paint, how much water, how much pigment you have in your brush. Okay? All right. So my background is pretty much dry. My lemons are fairly dry. So now I'm going to create some of the shadow color in the lemon. And the shadow color is actually, shadows are actually violet, believe it or not. They are the opposite of sun color. So, and shadows are transparent. So if you're painting something and you have, let's say, a green bush and it's reflecting, or there's a shadow on green grass, you're going to see the green grass and the texture of that green grass underneath it. But you don't necessarily want to paint black shadows. It doesn't work. It doesn't, your eye doesn't see shadows that way. Now I've just put some of this quinacridone rose into my aureolin and my New Gamboge mix, and I just want to add a little bit of warmth to the underside of the lemon. And you can lighten it by adding more water. You don't have to have a lot of pigment. You just want to have a little bit of water. Okay, now that's pretty orange, but I'm just gonna go with it for right now. And I'll show you. I will soften it by clean water on a brush, not an awful lot, and then I will pull that color into the dry portion of the lemon. Okay. Okay. I just want a little bit of some life in this. Okay, now I'm actually going to mix it with more violet, and that will dull the yellow down. When you mix a primary color with its complementary color, it dulls it down. Now here's another thing. I can lift up some paint just by going in with a relatively dry brush. I can actually lift up paint. I don't know if you can see how I did that, but that helps. Okay, now I'm going to go back with my cobalt blue. I'm going to mix it. Whoa, that's a lot of cobalt blue. Okay, let's mix it to give me my violet again. And that needs to be a little bit bluer. And I'm using my older brush without a good tip to mix. Okay. Okay, that's a good color. And I'm going to put a little bit of that into my color for the lemon. Now, I'm going to test it here to see. It's kind of a gray color, and that's what I see in the shadow areas of the lemon. I see kind of a gray, purplish gray. So I'm going to very carefully put that in, and remember, this is wet already because I just put in that orange, more orangey color. And you'll see by painting on an angle, you'll use capillary action, and it will draw your paint, the pigment down into the actual bottom of the painting, which is great. You can use that capillary action to help shape. Now, I like what I've got there with that sharp edge at the top. That looks good to me. This has to be softer over here, so clean water on the brush, and I just add a little clean water so that it will soften that edge that I put in. And notice I'm pulling more water out. And this needs to be a little bit softer, just a little, okay? Okay, now this is like the second layer. So this is starting to add my mediums and my darks, okay, or my mediums anyway. That's the second layer. Okay, first layer is light color blocking. Second layer is start to add your medium tones to shape what it is that you're creating. Have your tissue nearby so you can blot up areas that may run into other areas. Okay, now I'm going to let this sit for a while because I need to then go into my darks, okay? So, and there's a little bit of reflected light here, shadow, so I'm going to just try to lift a little bit of that off, okay? I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on the center of the segments, the lemon segments. And I'm going to take more of the aureolin, put that over here in the corner. And, whoops. Okay. So I'm going to start to actually shape those segments. Now, believe it or not, you say, well, gosh, there's some little white highlights in there. Well, I can make the white highlights out of this yellow because that, the segments are actually a lot darker than the yellow that I have on there, okay? So let me just start to put in some of these segments. And I'm working, now I'm going to have to leave a tiny little bit of white between each segment because I don't want them to run in together. So I'm using a little bit of the quinacridone rose that I mixed up and with the aureolin. Okay, so this is where using your brush, your new brushes that have a very good point really comes in handy, because you want, as you start to get more detailed and work on the details, you want to make sure that you have a nice fine point to make those things show. Okay. All right, so I'm putting a little bit more color around the edges. Okay. Always, always, always go back to your capillary action and use that to work for you, because it will pull the pigment into areas that are damp and wet, and you can soften them. And you don't have to paint everything exact. You can, especially for vegetables, flowers, things of that nature, there are imperfections and you can kind of take advantage. Okay, now I'm going to let this dry because I want to go back in with a darker color that will separate that so that I have a little bit more of a contrast in these segments. All right, so I'm putting in a little bit more of the orange area over here. So that is going to be, I'm going to let that sit for a minute. Okay, let's see, that's way too wet. Okay, so let me work on the shadows underneath, okay, while we let all of this dry. If you don't see your pencil lines and you want to make sure that you're painting your shadows exactly the way you want them, then I suggest going back and putting them back in very lightly. Now the problem is if your paper is still wet, those pencil lines will be harder to erase. So make sure you have fairly dry paper before you do this, okay? So now I see a shadow that comes here and goes this way. This is all dark here, and it goes over. And then there is another light shadow, and this goes there, and it comes over. And it wraps around this bottom lemon. Okay, and then this is a little bit darker. Okay, now I'm going to use the violet that I've already mixed, but I want to dull it down a little. So I'm going to put a little bit more of the yellow in it, which is the opposite, to make it a little bit more gray. That's still a violet, if you can see. It has a violet hue to it, but it's a little bit more gray. And that's what I want for the shadows. Now let's just see. All right, this may be tricky. You may want to, often I will work on 2 or 3 paintings at the same time. So if I'm waiting for one to dry, I go and paint on the other one. So you may want to try that, especially when you're getting started, because the biggest, it's hard to be patient and wait and let these things really dry thoroughly. Now I'm being very careful. I'm painting around my lemon here. And getting this shadow to look like it's going over the folds. And know that you can probably do 3 or 4 layers before watercolors start to get dirty. So you've got some runway, which is nice. All right, and then here's the shadow underneath. And now I can go in and do even darker on my next layer. But I want this to dry first so that I can get my next layer in. And this will go like this. And now I can paint right up to the lemon, the edge of the lemon, because it's dry enough. And I can create this shadow that's over the fabric. All right, so this is good for my first layer. Okay, that kind of is what the shadow looks like. And then I will go back, because you can see how very dark it is. I'm not even close to being that dark, but I have to do it in layers. Otherwise, I won't be happy with it. I see a little mark on the bottom of this lemon, and I'm just going to add that mark in here with my tip of my brush.